Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're traveling back to the year 1679 to a small village in the countryside of France. In this video we're going to experience what daily life was really like for ordinary people. How they worked, how they ate, how they survived the cold, and how their lives slowly passed between fire, fields, and silence. This is not a story of kings or wars, this is the quiet life of a forgotten farmer. So make yourself comfortable. And let's begin. In the winter of 1679, somewhere in the quiet countryside of France, far from the noise of Paris and the glittering court of King Louis XIV, a man named Julien opens his eyes before the sun has even thought of rising. The room around him is cold and dark. The air tastes of smoke and damp straw. Above him, the wooden beams of the ceiling disappear into shadows. Beside him, his wife, Marianne, still breathes slowly, wrapped in a rough wool blanket, her hair scattered across the thin pillow. Their children, two small shapes under another shared blanket, curl up at the far end of the bed to borrow warmth from each other. Outside, the world is silent except for the distant barking of a dog and the slow groan of the wind pushing against the door. Julien lies there for a moment, listening. He hears the gentle cracking of cooling embers in the fireplace, like a tired whisper at the end of a long conversation. He feels the stiffness in his back, the familiar ache in his hands, the quiet heaviness in his chest that comes not from sadness, but from the knowledge that today will be exactly like yesterday, and that this sameness is both a burden and a strange, fragile comfort. He does not have a clock. Time for him is not measured in minutes and seconds, but in light and darkness, in the routine of tasks that never fully end, and in the slow turning of the seasons. He swings his legs over the side of the bed, his bare feet meet the cold, packed earth of the floor, and he suppresses a shiver. He whispers a few words that he was taught as a child, a simple prayer that he cannot read but knows by heart, thanking God for another day, asking for enough strength to reach the end of it. In 1679, faith is not a question for him. It is the air that surrounds his life, a framework that explains both harvest and hunger, illness and healing, birth and death. The parish priest speaks of sin and salvation, of heaven and hell, and Julien does not argue. He does not have the luxury of arguing with the world. He is too busy surviving inside it. He moves quietly so as not to wake the children, steps across the room, and kneels by the fireplace. The last embers from the night glow faintly under a thin crust of ash. He blows on them gently, and a small, sleepy sparkle appears. He adds a few twigs, then a thicker piece of wood, waits, blows again. Slowly, a small flame takes hold, stretching itself, licking the dry bark, breathing new life into the room. The orange light touches the edges of clay pots, the wooden table, a rough bench, the dark shape of a wooden chest that holds almost all the family's possessions. The house is not large, one room to cook, eat, and sleep. A small loft above, where sacks of grain and a few tools are stored. It is simple, but it is theirs, as long as the taxes are paid, as long as the harvests come. When the fire has grown enough to hold itself upright, Julien reaches for a small piece of yesterday's bread. It is hard and slightly sour. He breaks it and soaks it in a little warm water from an iron pot, adding a thin splash of milk if there is any left from the cow. The smell is not rich, not luxurious, but comforting in its own way. Nourishment, however modest, is a quiet promise that he and his family will push through one more day. Behind him, he hears a small sound. One of the children, their son Pierre, has woken up. The boy rubs his eyes, sits up, and pulls the blanket tighter around his shoulders, his hair wild and his cheeks flushed from sleep. He is old enough now to follow his father into the fields, to learn the language of the soil, the silent discipline of sowing and reaping. Childhood in this time is short. Games and imagination exist, but mostly in brief spaces between chores, between tasks, between the demands of a life that begins early and ends too soon. Julien gives Pierre a small piece of soaked bread. The boy takes it with both hands, as if accepting something precious. They eat in silence, side by side, while the fire's warmth slowly pushes back the cold. Marianne stirs, opens her eyes, and sits up. Her movements are slow. Years of work, pregnancies, losses, and recoveries have settled into her bones. She asks softly if there is enough bread for the children, enough grain for today's soup, enough wood to last through the week. These are the questions that matter, not distant wars, not palace intrigues, not the theology debated by scholars far away. Her worries are as practical and as immediate as the next meal, the next frost, the next illness. Outside, the sky is still dark, but the slightest hint of gray is beginning to bleed into the horizon. Julien pulls on his worn linen shirt, his woolen vest, his heavy coat with patched elbows. He wraps a simple scarf around his neck, pushes his feet into thick leather shoes, cracked and softened by years of mud and rain. Before he leaves, he touches the wooden cross nailed above the door, a reflex born from habit and fear and hope all at once. In this year of 1679, God is everywhere and nowhere, present in the church, in the weather, in the unexplained sickness of a child, in the flicker of a candle that goes out suddenly. He steps outside. The cold air greets him with a sharp, clean touch. His breath becomes a pale cloud that drifts upward and disappears into the half-light. The village around him is still. A few low houses with thatched or tiled roofs, smoke rising in thin threads from chimneys, barns and sheds leaning slightly, as if tired. The narrow path between the buildings is muddy, marked by footprints, cartwheels, and animal hooves. There is no pavement, no lamps, no sounds of carriages rushing with news from the world. The center of the village is a small church with a bell tower that seems enormous only because everything else is small. On Sundays, the bell calls everyone to Mass. It is not a suggestion. Attendance is expected, a matter of community, of custom, and to many of salvation. The priest speaks in a voice that fills the simple stone building. He reminds them to obey the king, to pay the tithe to the church, to honor the Seigneur, to accept their position in life as the order willed by God. The idea that the world could be different, that power could flow from the people rather than from above, is not yet a seed in their minds. The century of revolutions is still a distant future dream, not even imagined by men like Julien. As he walks toward the fields, the path leaves the last houses behind and stretches out between bare trees and open land. The fields are his kingdom, though he does not own them. The land belongs to a local noble, a seigneur whose manor stands a few kilometers away, on slightly higher ground, overlooking the surrounding countryside like a watchful, indifferent eye. Julien is a tenant. He works these plots in exchange for the right to live on them and to keep a share of what they produce. Another share goes to the seigneur, another to the church, another through taxes to the distant king and his endless wars and magnificent buildings. What remains is what keeps his family alive. The soil is damp and heavy under his feet as he enters the field. Even in winter there is work to be done, mending fences, checking ditches, preparing tools, planning what little he can for the year to come. The last harvest was not terrible, but not generous either. The memory of bad years lingers, like a scar on the collective mind of the village. They talk about the time when frost came too early, when rain never stopped, when disease took the livestock and then the people. Stories of hunger are told in low voices, not to frighten, but to remember that nothing is guaranteed. Julien pauses for a moment and listens. He hears a crow calling from a bare branch. He hears the distant sound of another farmer's footsteps. He hears his own breath, steady, calm. In the silence of the early morning, there is a strange kind of peace. The world is harsh, but it is also simple. Each day has a clear purpose, to endure, to provide, to make it from sunrise to sunset with just enough strength left to do it again tomorrow. He takes a tool from the small shed at the edge of the field. The wood of the handle fits into his hand like an old friend. His fingers know every imperfection, every place where the grain runs slightly crooked, every smooth spot worn by years of use. He begins to work. The movement is repetitive, almost meditative. He pushes, lifts, turns, steps, breathes. The cold gradually leaves his fingers as his muscles warm. His thoughts move slowly, like the clouds that creep across the pale winter sky. Sometimes he thinks of nothing at all, letting his mind rest in the rhythm of his body. Sometimes he worries about the future, about sickness, about the taxes promised to the collector who will arrive sooner or later, carrying papers and authority and no understanding of the thin line between survival and disaster. From time to time, he glances toward the distant silhouette of the manor house. For him, it is almost another world. The seigneur has servants, better clothes, more food. He has walls of stone, thick and protective, rooms that stay warmer in winter and cooler in summer. He may complain about the cost of war, about the demands of the king's officials, but his children rarely starve. Julien does not hate him exactly. Hatred requires energy and information he does not have. Instead, he accepts him as part of the natural order, like a mountain or a river. The seigneur exists, the king exists, the church exists. Julien and those like him exist beneath them, supporting all that weight. As the morning advances, the sky grows brighter, though the sun remains hidden behind a blanket of dull clouds. The world never becomes fully vibrant. Colors are muted, brown and gray and faded green. Yet there is a subtle beauty in it. The patterned lines of fields, the delicate lace of bare branches against the sky, the small birds hopping along the edges of ditches, searching for seeds and insects. In 1679, there are no engines, no distant rumble of traffic, no constant mechanical noise. The loudest sounds are the human voice, the barking of dogs, the clucking of chickens, the ringing of a bell. Silence is not an absence. It is a presence, heavy and enveloping. Around midday, Julien straightens his back and looks toward the village. It is time to eat. He wipes his hands on his coat and walks back along the path. At home, the fire has been fed again, and the room is warmer. Marianne has made a simple soup from whatever they have, perhaps some root vegetables, a few dried beans, a small piece of salted pork if they are lucky. The smell fills the small space, rich not in luxury, but in meaning. It means they have something. It means they are still here. They sit at the table, Julien, Marianne, Pierre, and their younger daughter, Claire. Wooden bowls, rough wooden spoons, a loaf of bread darker than modern bread, heavy and dense. They eat slowly, not because they want to savor every taste, but because they know that eating too fast makes hunger return more quickly. Conversation is minimal. A comment about the weather, a mention of a neighbor who is coughing more than usual, a brief worry about the possibility of a new tax rumor that someone brought from a nearby town. Information travels by foot or by horse, carried by merchants, priests, and travelers. By the time it arrives here, it is often distorted, like a voice heard through thick walls. After eating, Julien rests for a few minutes, feeling the pleasant weight of food settling in his stomach. The children watch the fire, their eyes distant, imagining things they do not have the words to describe. Toys, as such, are rare. A carved piece of wood may become a soldier or a horse. A small stone can be a treasure. Their world is small, but their minds can stretch beyond it, even if they do not yet know the names of faraway places. Then it is time to return to work. The afternoon mirrors the morning. More tasks in the fields, perhaps some repair work on a fence or a cart, checking on the animals if they have a few. A cow, some chickens, maybe a pig. Each animal is wealth. Each one is both a resource and a responsibility. Illness in the livestock can mean hunger for the family. Julien inspects them with care, not with scientific knowledge, but with experience passed down from his father and his father before him. As he works, his thoughts occasionally flicker toward the distant capital. He has never seen Paris. He has only heard stories, streets crowded with people, markets overflowing with goods, buildings so tall they seem to touch the clouds, and most of all, the magnificence of the king's court. Louis XIV, the Sun King, is a figure wrapped in legend even while he is still alive. They say he wears clothes embroidered with gold, attends endless feasts, lives in a palace called Versailles, where mirrors and marble and fountains are more abundant than trees in the forest. For Julien, this might as well be another planet. The king's glory is a tale, a distant sun whose rays do not quite reach the village fields. In the late afternoon, the light begins to fade again. The sky takes on a tired golden gray, then slowly shifts toward blue, then toward the deepening shades of night. Julien feels the familiar weight of fatigue settle into his limbs, but there is satisfaction mixed with it. He has done what he could today. He has pushed back, just a little, against hunger and cold. It is not victory, but it is enough. He returns home once more. The smell of smoke greets him before he even opens the door. Inside, the fire glows warmly. Marianne is mending a piece of clothing by the light of the flames, her fingers moving steadily, the needle shining briefly as it catches the light. The children sit nearby. Pierre is whittling a small piece of wood with a simple knife, trying to shape it into a little horse. Claire is listening wide-eyed as her mother tells a familiar story about a saint, a miracle, or perhaps a long-ago ancestor who survived a terrible winter through courage and faith. These stories are not written down. They live in the voices of those who tell them, flowing from one generation to the next like a quiet river. In a world without books for most people, memory is both library and teacher. Julien sometimes adds his own details to an old tale, not to lie, but to keep it alive, to make it feel closer to his children's lives. He describes roads they know, fields they have walked through, the sound of the same church bell they hear every day. They eat another simple meal, a thinner soup this time, the leftovers stretched to cover one more evening. There is no dessert, no wine except on rare occasions or special feast days, no sweet luxury to end the day. But there is warmth, and there are familiar faces, and there is the steady, predictable comfort of routine. Outside, the night wraps itself around the house. Wolves are not so common here now, but people still tell stories of them, of eyes glowing at the edge of the forest, of howling that echoes across the fields. Fear of the dark lingers from older times when danger was closer, but even now, travelers avoid walking alone at night if they can. Later, when the children are half asleep, the village might still gather for certain moments in the year. A feast day, a marriage, a baptism. On such evenings, there might be a little music, a fiddle or a simple flute, clapping hands, keeping time, a circle of dancers stamping their feet on the packed earth. Laughter, rare and precious, escapes the heavy shell of daily worries. For a short time, they remember that they are not only workers and taxpayers and subjects of a distant king. They are people, with joy and humor and tenderness. Even in 1679, even in a small French village, there are whispers of happiness. But tonight is quiet. There is no feast, no gathering. After washing his hands and face in a bowl of cold water, Julien lies down again on the same straw-filled mattress where he woke before dawn. The straw pricks a little through the cloth, but he is too tired to care. Marianne settles beside him. The children curl up at their feet. The fire in the hearth has been banked for the night, covered with ash so a few coals will survive until morning. The room dims slowly as the last flames shrink and disappear. Shadows grow, becoming soft and undefined. Julien's eyes close, his breathing slows. His thoughts, already simple and focused during the day, grow even quieter. He does not imagine revolutions or great destinies. He does not wonder how history will remember him. He thinks, if he thinks at all, of the weather tomorrow, of whether the ground will be frozen, of whether the cow will give enough milk, of whether his children will grow strong enough to survive the winters ahead. In this time and place, life is a narrow path, edged on both sides by uncertainty, and yet, in the darkness of the small house, there is a deep, almost invisible kind of dignity. Julien has done what he could with what he has. He has worked the land, he has cared for his family, he has respected the rhythms of a world he did not choose, but has learned to navigate. Outside, the stars shine over France, indifferent to kings and peasants alike. In distant halls of stone and candlelight, nobles may speak of alliances, wars, and treaties. They may discuss the recent peace signed after long conflicts, the shifting borders, the pride of the kingdom. But here, in this quiet village, history is measured not in treaties, but in harvests, in births, in winters survived. The year 1679 will pass like the years before it and the years after it. Chronicles will record the actions of Louis XIV, his ministers, his generals. They will mention taxes, laws, and the building of palaces. They will not mention Julien. They will not mention Marianne or Pierre or Claire. But their lives are the invisible foundation on which all of that glittering history rests. The bread that feeds the cities comes from hands like Julien's. The wealth that builds the king's projects begins as grain emerging from soil that peasants tend in the wet morning cold. As sleep finally wraps itself around him, Julien breathes, slowly, heavily. His worries loosen their grip. For a few hours at least, he is free from the weight of his own existence. The house is quiet except for the occasional crack from the cooling wood, the sigh of the wind outside, the soft murmur of someone turning in their sleep. The village rests, the fields rest, the animals rest. The long, demanding world of 1679 pulls back like a tide, leaving only the gentle rhythm of lungs inhaling and exhaling in the darkness. And if you listen closely across the centuries, you can almost hear it. The quiet heartbeat of an ordinary life, lived far from glory, far from books, far from fame. A life like Julien's, small in the eyes of history, but immense in its effort, in its endurance, in its simple, stubborn refusal to let go of another day. In that stillness, under that heavy sky, in that cold, smoky room, a man sleeps, and with him sleeps a fragment of France itself, waiting for dawn to come again. Morning returns slowly to the village, not as a sudden arrival of light, but as a soft lifting of darkness. The sky pales first at the edges, then spreads its faint color over rooftops, trees, and frozen fields. Julien wakes before the others, as he almost always does. His body has learned the rhythm of time better than any clock. Even in sleep, he is listening for the morning. The warmth of the shared blankets fades as the fire's last hidden embers finally give up their glow. Cold slides back into the room, gentle but insistent. He rises quietly, his joints stiff from yesterday's labor. The ache is familiar now, like an old companion who never leaves. He moves to the hearth and repeats the same simple ritual as always, blowing life back into the ashes. A weak red spark answers, stubborn and loyal. Wood is added, one piece, then another. Soon the room breathes warmth again. Outside, the village stirs slowly. Doors creak open. A rooster cries out with exaggerated importance. Somewhere, a woman coughs as she carries water from the well. These sounds are the true bells of the village. They announce that life has resumed its patient march. Today is a market day in a nearby town. Not everyone will go, but those who have surplus grain, eggs, cheese, or small crafted goods will take the long walk or the cart journey. Julien rarely goes himself. The distance costs time, and time costs strength, but this week Marianne has saved a small wheel of cheese and a basket of dried beans. Perhaps it is enough to trade for salt, maybe some cloth, if fortune is generous. After the children wake and eat their morning bread, Julien prepares the cart. The wooden wheels groan softly as he pulls it from the shed. The donkey, tired-eyed but patient, is harnessed slowly. Every movement is economical. Nothing is rushed. Rushing leads to mistakes, and mistakes cost survival. They start along the narrow road as the sun finally lifts above the horizon in a dull silver glow. Frost still clings to shaded patches of earth. The village disappears behind a bend, swallowed again by trees and low hills. The road is not smooth. It curves around fields and through shallow valleys, worn into its shape by centuries of feet, hooves, and wheels. Along the way, they pass other villagers. Some walk alone, carrying baskets or sacks slung over their shoulders. Some travel in pairs, their quiet conversations drifting back through the cold air. There is no laughter yet. The market holds both hope and risk. Prices change. Traders deceive. A good deal can brighten a week. A bad one can darken a month. The town appears after nearly an hour, a cluster of stone buildings pressed together for warmth and safety. The church tower rises above them like a tired guardian. Market stalls are already forming in the central square. Wooden tables appear like skeletons being slowly clothed with goods. Loaves of bread dark and heavy, wheels of cheese in varying shades of yellow and brown, bundles of cloth in muted reds and blues, baskets of apples shriveled from storage, piles of turnips and onions, jars of honey guarded with care. Smells mix in the air, damp straw, animals, smoke, salt, leather, and human sweat. Voices overlap in a steady murmur. Bargaining begins without ceremony. Marianne sets down their small goods with quiet dignity. She has learned the language of the market, the balance between humility and firmness. She greets familiar faces with nods and soft words. Each exchange is both economic and social. News is traded alongside goods. Someone speaks of a sickness in a neighboring village. Someone else mentions rising tax demands. A traveling merchant speaks of new building projects near the king's palace. None of this changes Julien's day, but all of it settles into the shared memory of the people. After a careful exchange, Marianne secures a small sack of coarse salt and a piece of undyed linen cloth. The salt will preserve food through the months ahead. The cloth might become a shirt for Pierre when the old one grows too thin to patch. These small victories feel larger than they appear. Before leaving, Julien wanders among the stalls. He watches craftsmen shaping wood, mending metal, selling tools that shine with promise and cost more than he can offer. He sees children staring wide-eyed at colored ribbons and carved toys their families will never buy. He sees old men with faces like weathered stone, hands trembling as they count coins slowly, carefully. The sound of distant bells marks the midday hour. The market settles into a steady rhythm. Goods change hands. Coins move in quiet choreography. Hunger and hope pass between strangers. Then the journey home begins. The cart is lighter now, but the bodies are heavier. The donkey plods patiently. The road stretches again, familiar but long. The village greets them in the afternoon with the same smoke and quiet movement. Life resumes its ordinary pattern. Animals are tended. Tools are stored. The children run briefly through the yard, their laughter sharp and brief before evening calls them back inside. That night, after the meal, Julien sits near the fire longer than usual. The cloth from the market lies folded on the table. Marianne traces it with her fingers, already imagining how it will be cut and sewn. Pierre watches the flame dance on the walls. Claire leans against her mother, heavy with sleep. Julien's thoughts wander beyond the fields for a moment. He thinks of the king he will never see, of war he will never fight, of laws that will shape his life without ever asking his name. He wonders, briefly, if his children's lives will be the same as his. He does not hope for greatness. He hopes for continuation. Outside, the wind speaks softly through the bare branches. Inside, the fire whispers back. Another day in 1679 closes itself quietly, and tomorrow the world will begin again. Night deepens into another soft layer of darkness over the village. The stars appear faintly through thin clouds, scattered like distant embers across the cold sky. Inside the small house, the family sleeps in shared stillness. The fire exhales its last warmth. The walls hold the quiet like a fragile treasure. Julien dreams without images, without stories, only sensation, the slow rise and fall of breath, the distant echo of wind, the heavy comfort of exhaustion. Before dawn, the sound of rain begins. It is not sudden. At first it is a whisper, a barely there tapping on the roof. Then it grows steadier, as if the sky has opened a careful hand above the fields. The earth outside drinks slowly. By the time Julien wakes, the sound of water has settled into a continuous rhythm, wrapping the village in a soft gray curtain. Rain changes the character of the day. The fields become heavier. The mud grips at the feet. The cold creeps closer to the bones, yet work does not stop. It only slows, thickens, becomes more demanding. Julien rises again from the straw mattress, stretching his arms gently so the stiffness does not become pain. He feels the chill instantly. The fire must be woken again. He kneels and coaxes the sleeping coals back into life, the orange threads blooming softly under ash. The light returns with patience. The children stir one by one. Claire coughs quietly, her small chest tight from the cold nights. Marianne places a hand on her forehead, feeling the warmth of her skin with silent concern. Fever is always feared. Sometimes it passes. Sometimes it takes more than it gives back. Pierre eats his bread slowly, looking at the rain through the small, uneven window. Rain means fewer hours in open fields, more work in sheds and barns. It means fences soften, tools rust more quickly, shoes grow heavier with each step. Julien pulls on his coat once more and steps outside. The world is transformed. The sky presses low and gray. The thatched roofs drip steadily. Puddles gather in every shallow place. The road dissolves into a ribbon of mud. He walks toward the animals first. The cow greets him with a slow, tired sound. The chickens shift and cluck uneasily at the damp. He checks each one with the same care he would give to his children. Their health is tied tightly to the family's fate. Feed is measured carefully now. Waste is impossible. The rain settles deeper into the day. The village moves more quietly. Doors remain closed longer. Smoke from chimneys hangs low, pressed downward by the heavy air. Sounds travel strangely in rain, muted, softened, as if the world itself is wrapped in cloth. Julien works under the shelter of the shed, repairing a wooden handle cracked from long use. The rhythm of his hands is steady, sanding, adjusting, binding. His breath follows the movement without thought. This kind of work allows the mind to rest inside the body. From time to time, footsteps pass beyond the yard. A neighbor calls a brief greeting. News is exchanged in fragments. Someone's cow is ill. Someone's roof leaks. Someone's child shivers with fever. These are the announcements of this small world. By noon, the rain has not eased. The light remains dim. Inside the house, soup warms slowly over the fire. Today it is thinner. The larder grows more precise with each week of winter's approach. Each portion is measured with care designed by necessity. They eat again in quiet closeness. Claire's cough has softened. Marianne watches her between spoonfuls. Pierre speaks briefly of a bird he saw sheltering beneath a cart. A small thing, but in this world, small things are the bright beads threaded through the long rope of endurance. After the meal, Julien steps outside once more. The rain has become colder now, the droplets sharper on his skin. The fields shine darkly under the gray sky. He walks their edges slowly, examining the canals where water drains, making sure no blockage will drown the roots hidden beneath the soil. The seigneur's lands lie beyond, larger and more carefully divided. Even in rain they appear ordered. Boundaries are clear where power is strong. Julien's plots feel more vulnerable, less permanently defined. His life exists in spaces between stronger lines. As afternoon stretches forward, the rain finally loosens its grip. The clouds thin. The light brightens slightly, not with warmth, but with visibility. The sky exhales. Water drips from every surface. The world smells filled and alive despite the cold. Julien returns home once more. Wet clothes hang near the fire. Steam rises slowly from the fabric. Marianne wrings out water with practiced hands. Claire rests near the hearth, cheeks flushed but calmer now. Pierre helps with small tasks, carrying wood, sweeping mud from the threshold. Evening arrives without ceremony. Darkness folds around the house again. The family eats one last time. The cloth from the market is unfolded on the table. By firelight, Marianne begins the first careful cuts. Each motion carries future in its path. A future shirt, a future winter. Julien watches in silence. His presence is not loud. It does not need to be. He is the weight that holds the center steady. Outside, the village is quiet again. The rain has taught the soil its lesson for the day. Tomorrow will reveal what it has taken and what it has given. Later, when sleep returns gently to the room, Julien lies awake a little longer than usual. The sound of rain still echoes faintly in his ears. His body aches differently now, softened by damp rather than hardened by frost. He wonders, without words, how many more such days lie ahead. He does not count years, he counts winters. In distant cities, candles burn late into the night over ledgers, maps, and letters sealed with wax. Plans move across tables. Decisions slide into place. Taxes will rise. Borders will shift. Soldiers will march. But here in this quiet house, destiny moves at a slower pulse. It moves in breath, in fire, in grain, in cloth, in bone. The warmth of the family's bodies gathers near the hearth. The children sleep deeply. Marianne's breathing steadies beside him. Julien finally lets the weight of the day release its hold. His thoughts drift without direction. The rain has ended. The night listens. And somewhere in the dark soil beyond the walls, seeds wait in silence. The next morning arrives wrapped in a pale silence. No rain, no wind, no birds at first. Only the slow, careful breathing of the earth as it cools beneath a thin veil of frost. Julien wakes with the same quiet instinct as always, before sound, before light, before thought fully forms. The fire has almost entirely died in the night. Only a faint warmth lingers in the stones. Cold has reclaimed the room gently but firmly. He does not rise immediately. For a moment, he simply listens. The children sleep. Marianne sleeps. The house holds its breath. Outside, the frost locks the ground into stillness. Then he moves. Again the ritual. Again the breath blown into ash. Again the slow, obedient return of flame. Today is not a market day. Today is a maintenance day. The work that keeps everything from falling apart all at once. Pierre rises soon after. He is quieter now than he was as a younger child. His body is lengthening. His hands are beginning to reflect his father's. He eats and dresses without complaint. Claire still sleeps longer, her breath softer, her dreams unknown. Julien and Pierre step outside together. The frost cracks beneath their steps with a delicate sound. The air is sharper than yesterday. The animals stir slowly, uneasy in the cold. The cow exhales clouds of white breath. The ground feels rigid, unwelcoming. They work in near silence. Fence posts must be checked for rot, weak beams replaced. A corner of the shed roof sags under the memory of rain. Wood must be lifted, aligned, tied with simple iron fastenings hammered into place with dull rhythm. Julien watches Pierre closely. He does not teach with many words. He teaches with repetition. With correction made gently, once, rarely twice. A nod, a pause, a second attempt. By midday, Pierre's hands tremble slightly from the cold, but he does not complain. He has learned that the body learns endurance only when endurance is required. Inside, soup warms again. Today it is thickened with a handful of barley. Marianne smiles faintly when she sets the bowls down. It is a good sign for the week ahead. They eat. Claire speaks now of a dream she cannot fully describe, something about a river made of light. Julien listens without interpretation. Dreams belong to their owners. After the meal, the sun appears briefly through thin clouds. The frost softens. Julien takes this as permission to inspect deeper parts of the field. The soil beneath remains dark and heavy, too wet yet for planting. Patience is part of survival. His mind drifts as his feet carry him along old boundaries. He thinks of his father, long buried beneath the same soil he now walks. He thinks of his grandfather, whose face he remembers only from description. The land outlives its keepers. It only pretends to belong to them. In the distance, he sees motion, riders, 2 figures on horseback moving slowly along the ridge, tax collectors. The word reaches him before they do. His body tightens without panic. This is part of the world's rhythm as well. The collectors arrive when they arrive. Resistance is rarely worth the cost. By late afternoon, the riders enter the village. Papers are unrolled in the center, names are called, amounts spoken aloud without interest in whether they are possible. Julien steps forward when his turn comes. The coins he offers are not enough. They are never enough. A mark is placed beside his name, a warning given, another season to settle the rest. He bows slightly and steps away. Relief and dread mix quietly. That night, the house feels smaller than usual. The fire burns lower. The children sense the tension without understanding it. Marianne says nothing, but her hands move more tightly as she mends. Later, when sleep comes, it is thinner. Julien dreams of water rising slowly through fields, covering rows of grain just as they begin to grow. He wakes before the dream finishes. Days stack upon days. Cold hardens. Soft snow comes once, then again. The world narrows further. Paths vanish. Travel slows. The village contracts inward, breath becoming the primary movement. Claire becomes ill for several days. Fever rises, falls, rises again. Marianne sits beside her through the nights. Julien feeds the fire continuously, afraid of what cold might take if he allows the flame to weaken. The priest comes once, says prayers, leaves no medicine. There is no medicine to leave. Claire survives. The relief does not explode. It settles quietly. Gratitude is not loud in this world. It simply adjusts the way the next breath is taken. Winter deepens. Food thins. Salt saves what it can. The cow gives less milk. The donkey grows lean. Pierre grows broader. Sometimes Julien hears distant rumors from travelers who pass through the village and do not stop. They speak of unrest, of hunger in other regions, of murmurs against the king's endless demands. These words float briefly and disappear. They do not root here yet. One night, far past midnight, Julien wakes to a new sound. Not wind, not rain. A low, distant murmur. Voices. Many voices. He rises and steps outside. Down the far road, torches move slowly like a fallen constellation. Travelers, refugees, displaced families moving away from something worse. They pass without stopping. The village watches from doorways. No one calls out. No one follows. The torches fade. Time continues. Spring will come. It always does. And when it does, Julien will stand again in softened earth, seed in hand, spine bent toward another year he does not yet know if he will deserve. Spring does not arrive suddenly. It leaks into the world a little at a time. The snow softens first, turning to heavy water that sinks into the waiting ground. The frost retreats reluctantly, leaving behind a skin of mud that clings to every step. The brown fields grow darker, richer in color, as if waking from a long, controlled sleep. Julien feels the change before he truly sees it. The air shifts. The wind carries different weight. The cold no longer bites. It only reminds. With spring comes work of a different kind. The plow is brought out again. The seed sacks are opened slowly, carefully, like sacred containers. Each handful of grain is a decision. Each scatter into softened soil is a quiet promise made without certainty of reward. Pierre follows closely now, not as a child who watches, but as a body that works beside him. The tools feel less foreign in the boy's hands. His shoulders square under the sun. Blisters form and harden. The line between son and future man grows thinner. Day by day, furrows spread across the fields like dark veins. The soil opens itself and closes again around what it is given. Julien moves steadily, no rush, no delay. His breath matches the pull of the plow. The donkey leans forward with patient resistance. Birds follow behind, waiting for exposed insects. The sky opens wider with every passing week. Life in the village expands outward again. Doors remain open longer. Smoke grows thinner. Children's voices return to the paths between houses. The well becomes crowded with quiet conversations. Small repairs bloom everywhere. Doors rehung, roofs patched, fences reset. Marianne works endlessly. Cloth becomes clothing. Grain becomes bread. Leftovers become tomorrow. Her hands rarely pause now. Claire follows her everywhere, no longer weak, no longer pale. Her laughter arrives carefully at first, then with full permission. Sundays return with warmth. The villagers gather in lighter clothing. The church feels less heavy when air moves through it freely. The priest's voice echoes with less dampness in the stone. The prayers do not change, only the bodies that speak them feel different now, less folded inward. By early summer, green pushes through everything. The fields rise with quiet confidence. Julien walks among the growing rows at dawn and at dusk, touching leaves gently, feeling weight form in places that were empty only weeks before. Growth has no sound, yet it fills the world. The tax collectors come again. They always do. Their arrival is less sudden now, announced quietly by riders who pause at the edge of the village before entering. Coins change hands. Names are marked. Julien gives what he has spared. It hurts less than before. The fields stand higher behind him now. Hope is permitted again. Autumn whispers far before it arrives. The sun lowers. The wind cools. The green hardens into gold. Harvest begins. The entire village moves as a single body. Hands cut and gather. Backs bend. Voices rise and fall in steady exchange. Grain fills baskets. Apples darken in piles. The air becomes rich with dust and sweetness and effort. Julien works until his arms burn deep into the muscle. Pierre works beside him without being asked. Claire carries small bundles proudly. Marianne oversees the storing, the drying, the careful guarding of what will decide the coming winter. When the last field is cleared, the village exhales. A celebration follows instinctively, not by design, but by survival's release. A single evening of laughter, movement, shared food, and borrowed music. The fiddle plays. Feet stamp the ground. For a short while, the future feels distant and harmless. Then the nights grow longer again. The fire gains importance once more. The stored food becomes sacred. The path narrows. One evening, Julien returns from checking the outer fence to find a stranger seated near the hearth, a traveler, thin, wrapped in patched cloth, dirt in the lines of his face. The man speaks softly. He tells of distant unrest, of villages emptied by hunger, of conscriptions growing heavier, of rumors of resistance no one yet dares to name aloud. He stays one night, eats quietly, sleeps with his back near the fire, leaves before dawn. The world outside has brushed past the house again. Winter returns with discipline. This winter is colder. The snow is deeper. The stored grain is enough, but only just. The cow grows weak. One chicken does not survive. The donkey's ribs show clearly beneath skin. Claire coughs again, but lightly. Pierre works without rest. Marianne grows thinner. Julien counts days not by calendar, but by consumption. A handful less. A loaf stretched thinner. Fire fed with scraps that were meant for later. One night, the wind howls with new voice. The roof shudders. Snow slips through unfamiliar cracks. Julien reinforces beams in darkness. His breath clouds the lantern air. His hands bleed unnoticed. Morning comes pale and silent. No damage worse than expected. The house still stands. The animals still breathe. The family still wakes. That is enough. Another year passes, and another. Pierre becomes a man without ceremony. Julien does not announce it. It is visible in the way the boy no longer follows but walks beside, in the way his voice deepens without request, in the way his gaze lingers on the fields as if they were already his responsibility. Claire grows into her mother's shadow. She learns thread and water, fire and grain, wound and patience. Marianne's hair grays quietly. Julien's back bends further. The king grows older somewhere far away. Wars rise and fall beyond the hills. None of it interrupts the rhythm here. Only seasons matter, only breath, only survival. Years begin to pass more quietly now. Time does not rush anymore. It thickens. Each season feels heavier than the last, not only on the land, but within Julien's body itself. His steps slow in ways he does not announce. His hands ache even before the cold arrives. The mornings take more effort to leave behind. Still he rises. Still the fire is woken. Still the fields are entered as if nothing has changed. But something has. The work still exists, yet it no longer defines the whole of his strength. Julien begins to give more of the heavier labor to Pierre without speaking it aloud. The plow leans more often into the younger man's weight. The repairs are lifted by younger arms. The cart is guided more by Pierre's hands than Julien's. This passing of burden happens without ceremony, without words, without any declaration of age. It simply happens because it must. Pierre accepts it naturally. He has grown into the work so completely that the work now wears him, just as it once wore his father. His back straightens. His gaze lengthens. He thinks farther ahead than one day at a time, not in grand dreams, but in practical sequences. Seed now, harvest later, repair today, shelter tomorrow. He plans nothing loudly, but his silence has direction. Claire grows with a different rhythm. She becomes quieter, more observant. Her laughter thins into something softer. Her eyes begin to linger on the edge of the village when travelers pass, on strangers' hands, on unfamiliar ways of speaking. She does not yet desire escape, only difference. Marianne watches both of them with a quiet mix of pride and distance. Motherhood changes shape as children grow. The closeness of dependency fades into the watchfulness of waiting. She does not follow Claire as closely anymore. She does not instruct Pierre as often. Her work turns inward now, more preservation than preparation. Julien notices these shifts without understanding them fully. He senses the household loosening in ways that do not threaten but cannot be reversed. The center still holds, but the edges are stretching. Another winter comes. It is not cruel, but it is long. Snow lies evenly across the land like a patient blanket. The village moves slowly under it. Fires burn low. Words grow fewer. Even time seems muted beneath the weight of white. Julien spends more time indoors now. His hands work on small things. Handles, notches, repairs that once would have been done quickly are now completed with greater care. He sits longer by the fire. He listens more. Sometimes he falls asleep before the fire itself does. When spring returns again, he rises with it, but not as sharply as before. Pierre is already in the fields when he arrives. The furrows are already beginning. Julien joins him, but he lags only slightly behind without comment. At dusk, when they walk home, Pierre's pace leads and Julien follows. This is new. Years continue to fold. The king changes. They hear the name one season and another the next, the way one hears the passing of storms that never quite reach their sky. Authority remains distant, faceless. The crown changes. The weight remains. Taxes rise in new shapes. Demands grow more exact. The village adapts because it always has. One summer the harvest is thin, not disastrous, but narrow enough to sharpen worry. They stretch what they can. Salt grows precious again. The cow weakens, then recovers. A child in the village is buried quietly near the church at the edge of a cooling sunset. The priest speaks about eternity. The villagers think about winter. That night, Julien sits awake longer than usual. The fire dims low. The house breathes. He feels the weight of everything. Not fear, not sadness, but something like accumulation. So many mornings, so many seasons, so many identical tasks performed long past the point of novelty. The life he has lived stretches behind him like a road with no markers. He does not regret it, but he feels it. Another year, another spring. Pierre marries without celebration beyond the village. The girl is quiet, strong in gesture rather than voice. She enters the household easily, as if she has always been there. Claire watches her with curious distance. Their silences speak different languages. Julien steps back further. The plow now belongs to Pierre. The grain decisions belong to Pierre. The future, quietly but completely, belongs to Pierre. Julien tends smaller things now. Tools, fire, animals that need patience rather than strength. His body carries stiffness like a permanent garment, yet his presence remains central. The house still orients around his quiet approval. Marianne grows slower too. Her hair fades into silver. Her hands bend slightly inward from years of sewing. She sits more often now, watching the fire as if listening to something only it remembers. One evening, as the light thins into gold, Julien stands at the far edge of the field alone. The grain is high, the air smells full, the entire village rests behind him, unseen but known by memory. He does not work, he only stands. His breathing is shallow and steady. He feels the earth beneath him. The same earth that received his father, the same earth that will one day receive him. The thought does not trouble him, it simply arrives. Seasons continue. Claire grows older. Travelers grow more frequent. Rumors thicken. There is disturbance far beyond the hills. Not yet here, but closer than before. Men in other lands speak louder now, not of taxes, but of rights, of hunger not as punishment, but as injustice, of kings not as sun, but as shadow. The words visit the village and leave again, not yet staying long enough to take root. But each year they linger slightly longer. Julien listens. He no longer reacts, and he only listens. One morning, he does not rise with the fire, not immediately. Marianne touches his shoulder. His eyes open slowly. The delay is brief, but it is noticed. After that day, small pauses appear in his waking. Small rests appear in his walking. Small silences appear between sentences. Pierre notices. He says nothing. One winter night, the fire unexpectedly goes out. Julien wakes to cold and realizes no one else hears it. He struggles up, slower than ever before. His legs shake as he kneels. He breathes ash again into fragile life. The flame weakly returns. But his hands tremble beyond warmth. Marianne watches from the bed. That night, neither of them sleeps again. Spring returns again. But this time, Julien does not walk the furrows. He leans on the fence and he watches the motion of seed and soil as a witness rather than a maker. The world continues beautifully without him. This is perhaps the heaviest truth yet, and still, it does not break him. It only quiets him further. That autumn, the harvest is strong, and the village is full. Bread is thick again! Firewood stacks high. Music returns one evening. Pierre dances for the first time as a man with a future rather than a boy shaped by need. Claire watches with a distant smile. Julien sits. He claps once. That is enough. Another winter passes. Julien coughs more. Marianne moves slower. The house becomes warmer, not from fire, from closeness, from anticipation, from awareness. Life narrows now, not in fear, in focus. Breath becomes louder, light becomes softer, memory becomes heavier. One night Julien dreams again, not of water, not of fields, but of walking behind himself through seasons he no longer enters. He awakens without shock, only recognition. Time is bending inward, not toward the end, but toward something quieter. The world does not announce the beginning of an ending. It does not ring a bell. It does not darken the sky all at once. It only grows quieter in places that were once filled with effort. Julien notices it first in his hands. The tools feel farther away now, even when they are in his grasp. The weight of wood surprises him. The warmth of the fire reaches him a little later than before. His breath arrives more deliberately. Each motion seems to ask permission from the one before it. He does not speak of this. Not to Pierre, not to Marianne, not to Claire. There is no language for such transitions in the life he has lived. There are only actions and the slowing of actions. Spring still comes. It always does. But Julien now experiences it like a visitor rather than a participant. He walks as far as the fence and no further. He feels the wind and does not chase it into the open field. He watches the first green rise from the soil without kneeling beside it. The land continues its long conversation with seed and rain without waiting for his voice. Pierre moves in full rhythm now. His body bends where Julien's once did. His hands carry effort without asking why. He does not look back when he works, because he has already learned where he stands. Leadership has entered him without ceremony. Julien does not correct him anymore. He does not instruct. He observes. And in observation, there is both distance and peace. Marianne sits more often now near the fire. Her sewing slows not because her skill has faded, but because she allows time to widen between movements. Her breathing becomes part of the room. She watches Claire with eyes that no longer chase the future, only acknowledge it. Claire grows in a different direction still. There is restlessness in her silence now. She speaks of places beyond the hills with a gentleness that hides longing. She listens longer when travelers speak. Her hands do not follow the grain as instinctively as Marianne's once did. She is not fleeing the land, but she is no longer fully rooted in it either. Julien understands this without judgment. Roots do not bind forever. They only hold long enough for something to grow. Another winter arrives. Julien does not measure it by cold anymore. He measures it by the sound of his own lungs when he wakes, by the distance between chair and hearth, by how long it takes to rise, by how deep his sleep sinks into him. One morning, Pierre finds him already seated when the fire is still dark. Julien is simply sitting, watching the unlit hearth as if it were memory. Pierre kneels and lights it without speaking. That gesture becomes the world turning once more. From then on, the fire is rarely Julien's responsibility anymore. This is the quiet transfer. Days now assemble differently. Julien sits longer in silence. People come to him without knowing why. Neighbors pause in the doorway longer than needed. Old men sit beside him and say nothing. Children drift near and wait to be noticed. And when Julien speaks now, everyone listens. His words are few, but they seem to settle deeper than effort ever could. Another year curls inward. Marianne grows thinner, Julien grows slower, yet the house feels warmer than it ever has, because soon, warmth is no longer expected. It is cherished. One evening, as autumn presses gold into the last leaves, Julien and Marianne sit beside each other by the fire without speaking. The flames are low, the room breathes softly. Outside, harvest carts pass slowly along the distant road. Life is still happening, it always is. Julien turns his head slightly and Marianne is sleeping while awake. Her breath is shallow and steady. He does not wake her, he does not move. He only watches. The next morning she does not rise. The house remains quiet longer than usual. Pierre waits. Claire waits. Julien waits. Only when the sun rises too far without sound does the truth settle. There is no urgency, there is no scream, there is only stillness. The village gathers without being called. Marianne is wrapped in cloth she once cut herself. The priest speaks words that have been spoken countless times before. Julien does not cry, not because his grief is small, but because it is too complete to escape. After that day, time loosens its grip further around him. The house shrinks into echoes. Her place is always warm. The fire listens differently now. Julien moves as if through layers of remembered air. He sits where she once sat. He waits without knowing what he is waiting for. Claire touches his shoulder more often. Pierre stands closer when he speaks. Julien does not resist their care. Another winter passes. Julien survives it quietly. Another spring returns. He does not walk into it. He only opens the door and lets the air enter him. He sleeps longer now. Dreams return with unexpected clarity. Not images, feelings, warmth, stone, fire, grain falling through fingers, hands that once held him when he was young. One evening, as the sun dissolves into red behind the hills, Julien asks Pierre to bring him to the fence. Pierre does so without question. Julien stands where he once stood years ago. The land rolls out before him. Fields grown by hands no longer his, yet still his entirely. He breathes once, twice, slowly. The wind lifts his thinning hair. He smiles without reason. Not happiness, not sadness or recognition. When Pierre leads him back inside, Julien does not look behind him again. The fire is already lit. The room waits. That night, Julien does not rise when the fire dims. Pierre notices. Claire notices. The house gathers itself inward. Morning light arrives. Julien does not. There is no struggle, no sound, no drama, only the absence of effort where effort once lived. The village buries him beside Marianne. The soil receives him without resistance. The priest speaks. Pierre stands tall. Claire stands still. And then the world continues. Fields grow, seeds fall, children laugh. Tax collectors arrive. Kings change, roads shift, hills remain. The house lives on. Another child will one day sit near that same hearth. Another dawn will enter through the same uneven window. Another man will once again wake before the sun and believe the fire belongs to him. And somewhere, beneath all those layers of living, Julien remains exactly where he always was. In the ground, in the breath, in the warmth passed between hands, in the quiet endurance that built a life without ever asking to be remembered. The night deepens, the fire softens, and sleep at last becomes wide enough for everything to rest.